Well, let me ask you, Jonah Blank, you just heard that Renway Hwang saying, effectively that here's Barack Obama lecturing the Philippines. What's your reaction to that?
Well, this is a core part of U.S. Foreign policy. By law, the U.S. government is forbidden to provide security assistance or security cooperation with any units of the military or the police who have been credibly implicated in human rights abuses. It's really quite amazing the level to which this law dictates a lot of engagement. There are nearly 1 million cases every year that have to be reviewed, and many of them are rejected or deferred because the U.S. is not able to verify that Police Unit X or Military Unit Y has not been involved in extrajudicial killings. So the president was really simply stating what the U.S. law actually says.
Renway Hwang, your thoughts on this? Because as China's role around the world grows, more and more military partnerships are going to come about. Should China have the same kind of rules that you can't partner with people who commit human rights abuses? You can't partner with countries that commit human rights abuses.
But the precondition for our military involvement to outside is very clear that we should go along with domestic government.
Even if it means turning a blind eye to
the domestic politics or domestic affairs outside could not say you can control or change anything before the local government.
Well, the Philippines prides itself as a liberal democracy, and it signed several agreements regarding human rights, membership in the International Criminal Court. So it's also our responsibility to take criticism from other countries that share the common values with the Philippines. Rule of law, human rights, so forth and so on. So in a way, I think the Philippine government overreacted when it was criticized by a friend and allied country. We have to take into account the Philippines is part of a community of nations, basically part of what we call the Western Alliance or the West, that have to uphold those values. So if we get criticized, then we have to examine ourselves whether we are really living up to the commitment that we have basically adhered to or signed into.
Epimaco dancing, is Rodrigo Duterte too thin-skinned?
Yeah. No, I don't think so. Again, when we talk about criticisms, we have no problem with that. But as long as this criticism is what we call evidence-based, in fact, even in human rights, they've been already promoting that human rights advocacy must be evidence-based. So any criticism without any evidence is a mere propaganda. And the sad thing about the criticisms that our president or our country has been receiving from the international community is that they're basing their opinions on media, on local media, which obviously is not in accordance with what evidence has been saying. That any human rights violation, as they allege, is not really a violation itself, but it's really a legitimate police operation. And again, we've been looking at the numbers, and I've seen all the case folders of this 1,000, at least 1,300. Each case really has a case folder. And we're verifying it right now, at least to see if there's an indicative massive violation of human rights. And again, we'll be able to put up that report in 10 or 12 days from now.
The rules of, you were talking about liberal democracy, Reynaldo Cruz de Castro, the rules of bilateral relations in that.
Rules being part of a community of nations that share common values. So as part of this, we have to be very conscious of our responsibility and be open to criticism to countries that share our values.
Is the pendulum swinging against it when you see things like free trade agreements are harder and harder to agree upon? When you see here...
But that's basically the test of your commitment to the values that you hold dear. Like, for example, the rule of law. So if other liberal democracy criticizes you, then you have to go through a deep self-reflection. Am I living up to my commitment? Do I still adhere to these values that other countries share? And of course, if I get criticized, I don't simply shift to the other side and basically cross the Rubicon just because my friends and allies who helped me during the time when you have a major natural calamity would just simply be discarded.
Jonah Blank, soon we'll have a new U.S. president. Will the winds of liberal democracy be starting to ebb when that new president comes in?
I certainly hope not. I hope that the winds of liberal democracy will continue to blow hard and strong. And I'd like to pick up on the point that Reynaldo just made so well. If you are committed to liberal democratic values, you should be open to criticism from friends. And the United States should not simply be lecturing other nations. The United States should be listening to the very valid criticisms of our own policy. Here in the U.S., we, as the Black Lives Matter movement has shown, we have a real problem with police enforcement in African American and other minority communities. Some Americans take criticism of that as an attack on America itself. Other Americans, and I include myself in that camp, take that criticism as an invitation to live up to our best ideals. And I think the same can and should be true in the Philippines.
All right, the Philippines and the broader region, I want to finish on this point. We're at a point where the disputes continue. I think, 11 nations who have designs on the South China Sea, agreeing to common rules. Is it something that's becoming harder and harder? I'll put it to you, Renway Hwang.
I think South China Sea could not be the fundamental issue between or among our neighbor countries. We can talk and have dialogue, but the domestic development.
But why is it becoming more and more tense in that case?
Yes, this is a process. From very beginning, we have very different points, a very different nationalism or sovereignty. But if we talk more, we can find some points in the middle.
Rodrigo, Reynaldo, is it going to become harder and harder to reach some kind of a multilateral deal, a multilateral agreement that can really diffuse the tension?
Well, I can
in
also
Asian
say that
waters?
we can manage the tension either through bilateral or multilateral approach, but I don't think this issue would be resolved in our lifetimes. Now, this is a territorial dispute that would probably last for generations. The best that we could do, the international community can do.
Why does it have to last for generations?
Well, you have basically China becoming emergent and basically determined, trying to effect its maritime expansion. The South China Sea, East China Sea, and there's a factor in that this is, looking at how China how China looks at this issue. For them, it's a matter of realizing the Chinese dream.
We still use the term as put aside disputes and development first together.
Yeah.
But before we develop them together, we should put the disputes aside.
I agree with that, except that the Chinese condition also includes that we would have to accept Chinese sovereignty.
We have put it almost 30 years, but many neighbors put it not aside. They put it in the control.
Mm-hmm. Final question, I'll put it to you, Jonah Blank. As China becomes more powerful, what will the U.S. role be in those waters? Will it be increased, or will they take more of a backseat?
I think it will be increased, but only in line with the wishes and the participations of U.S. partners in ASEAN. So I don't think the U.S. is going to get out ahead of ASEAN, and likewise in consultation with Japan and Taiwan for the East China Sea. I think the U.S. is looking to be a security provider and a security facilitator for its partners in the region. But if the Philippines withdraws from that group, that weakens the group as a whole. The U.S. is quite comfortable, I believe, with nations not falling into simply one camp or the other. Vietnam, Indonesia are countries that are not U.S. treaty allies, but they are partners on very specific issues. And if the Philippines moves into that camp, I don't think it has to spell disaster for anyone.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Jonah Blank, many thanks for joining us from Washington. Epimaco Densing, many thanks for joining us for what is a late hour in Manila, for being with us. I want to thank Reynaldo, Cruz, Castro,
Thank you very
and
much.
Renway, Hwang. Stay with us, though. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to James Creedon.
James, Francois.
The hashtag Duterte in China, is it trending?
It is, I think, mostly amongst people who have an interest in the story itself, in particular in the Philippines. And I'll just show you a couple of headlines first. So the slogan, "Making Friends, Not War," is appearing in a lot of headlines. And that seems to be a lot more conciliatory language than what we were seeing recently, perhaps an unfair sort of juxtaposition of headlines there. But
it's a family show. Don't use any words that, you know.
Curse. We'll just go with curse. We do remember there was that rather fun moment there recently. In any case, images of Duterte arriving in China, all smiles, all friendliness. And so let's just take a look at the different sort of talking points on Twitter. Can we be friends with our neighbours and still keep close those from afar? That's what one Filipino Twitter user is wondering. Can this balancing act be struck, I suppose? Another pointing to the fact here, this is somebody sharing a tweet talking about Philippine stocks having their best day since the May election. So many interpreting that as a response to the visit by Duterte to China. And is this a case of Beijing to the rescue vis-a-vis Filipino economic matters? Wonders one person. How many countries have the US interacted with? Says another, much more US skeptical of the US role in the world. How many countries has the US interacted with and eventually turned into a war zone? Libya, Syria, etc. Reform the Philippines. And the same Twitter user saying, because the world does not revolve around the US only. So somebody clearly there with a will to see a diversification in terms of Filipino diplomacy. And another person here is expressing the exact opposite sentiment, that this is a case of the Philippines slowly merging into being a Chinese colony. That was the one I just showed you earlier, in fact, so I'm being a little bit repetitive there. Can we be friends with our neighbours and still keep close those from afar? I'll just finish with this poll in the Philippine Star newspaper, and what that poll suggests is that there is a lot more positive sentiment for the US than there is for China. 76% of adult Filipinos have much trust for the US, while just 22% of adult Filipinos have much trust for China. But actually 55% of Filipinos have little trust for China. So there is clearly quite a divergent picture in terms of the public perception of those two powers.
And the policies of Duterte.
Yeah.
Renway, Hwang, let me ask you, because Duterte is undoubtedly a Twitter superstar. Is he a superstar on the Chinese social media Weibo?
Yes. Many Chinese feel very interesting how a new Philippine president sudden change from Aquino to a new policy. It's also a fresh phenomenon for us.
Reynaldo de Cruz, de Castro, I know that you speak Mandarin.
I don't.
No, you don't.
My area of specialization is actually Philippine-U.S. security relation.
Okay.
Not China.
I would have trolled through Twitter, but my Mandarin is a little rusty, Francois. So sorry, this might actually be providing a skewed picture. It's a fair point that Twitter is certainly underrepresented by Chinese voices. So certainly what's being said on Weibo would be worth taking into account too, for sure.
All right, many thanks. I want to thank our panel once again.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.